Welcome back to the Constantine reviews after a long hiatus. I was waiting to see if the show would get a second season. More on that later. Episode 4, A Feast of Friends, is based on the first Hellblazer story and is named after one part in that comic. The previous episodes have been largely Constantine dealing with random supernatural occurrences, but today's episode, it gets a lot more personal for him. We begin in an airport where a very sweaty man called Gary Lester is passing through security. He tells the security officer that he's visiting a friend, but because he looks like an obvious drug addict, Gary's taken for questioning. Gary's interrogated over why he was in Sudan and what's in the small bottle he has with him, which when the officer goes to pick up, Gary gets pretty twitchy about. But the officer is confident he has drugs, lifting up Gary's sleeve to reveal needle marks. He goes to open the bottle, but he doesn't get very far, as he drops and smashes it on the table, freeing thousands of insects that fly violently into his mouth. With Gary Lester's introduction and the cloud of insects, it's clear the episode takes a majority of its plot from the first Hellblazer story, Hunger, and its second part, A Feast of Friends. I'm very interested to see how they do this, because Hunger and A Feast for Friends is one hell of a dark story, so this will leave some mental scars on our characters. We shift to Zed and Constantine at the park as he's teaching her more about her abilities, telling her to relax and lower her walls, which is when she sees coins fall from the sky. But suddenly time stops as Manny has showed up for a chat, and he mentions that people have their own unique markers for when celestial beings are near, so Manny notes that Zed seeing pennies from heaven shows she's quite traditionally minded. Which seems like a throwaway line, however, Zed's traditional interpretation of angels is very relevant to her backstory, and says a lot more about her than is immediately noticeable. Manny asks John if Zed can help them against the rising darkness. However, he's wary that John might scare her off. Constantine asks why he's there, but Manny says he isn't, and disappears again, unhelpfully. Manny hasn't exactly been helpful when he's shown up lately, but I think that leads into his inability to affect things on Earth. And he's only given Constantine information when that information wouldn't have been available to him any other way, and consequently furthering the plot. Zed and John return to the mill and it's immediately obvious that it's been broken into, but due to the multitude of mystical security systems installed, John knows the intruder remains present. The place is crawling with insects inside, and in the main room they find Gary Lester caught in an anti-gravity trap. John isn't happy to see him, especially because the last time he saw him was Newcastle, as he was with him when what happened to Astra happened. Gary tells John that after Newcastle he couldn't handle anything and needed an escape, which Constantine is very critical of. What's interesting is that Gary tried to forget through drug abuse, but John also tried to forget as well by checking himself into the asylum, trying to run away just as much. But it's possible that John's more pissed at his past coming back to haunt him rather than Gary himself. After that journey down memory lane, Gary informs John he's done something bad, as we get a flashback of Gary in Sudan looking for drugs. He sees a man with cuts on his face that were containment markings, as he had a demon trapped inside him, and Gary says that he had to do something to atone for previous events in Newcastle. Gary feels compelled to act, so performs the exorcism trapping the demon in the bottle we saw at the start. At least on a basic level, Gary was doing what he thought was right to make amends, so it's an incredibly tragic series of events for him. However, his comic book counterpart? Gary exorcised the demon because of the rush of power it gave him, and it was almost as if the demon seduced him into performing the ritual so it could get free. So in the show, he has much more noble tendencies. However, we then shift to the consequences of his actions, as the demon inside the security officer is running amok in the airport food court, eating everything in sight with a zombie-like hunger, even going so far as to dunk his hands into boiling oil to get at more food. But eventually the guy collapses as the demon exits his body. This is another difference to the comic actually, because in the comic, the people under the influence of the demon are fully aware of themselves for quite a while, making it more tragic to see them consumed by hunger. In the show, it just looks like the demon turns them into zombies, devoid of any self-awareness, dehumanizing them and making them less sympathetic. Back at the Constantine cave, John's using another of his mystical devices, the Ring of Solomon, to inscribe the Seal of Solomon on a bottle, which will be sufficient to trap the demon inside. Also, another little Easter egg for you, as the comic version of Pandora's box can be seen in the background. Zed tells John he's being too hard on Gary, which is when John tells her all about Gary's messed up life, like how he had a rich father and had everything he ever wanted. He was always a drug user, but it's after Newcastle he became a full-blown junkie, with John considering Gary's life a complete waste, so no love lost there. Meanwhile, the demon is continuing to take victims as a woman witnesses the swarm in a bathroom and is then eating everything she can in a supermarket, including the face of a security guard. I don't mean to harp on the differences between the comic and the show, but this is something I think the show missed out on. Because in the comic, the demon's hunger wasn't just for food. It wanted whatever its host found fulfilling in their lives. So, for example, there was a priest who would eat religious icons to appease the demon. So yeah, I think more of that would have helped move away from the "they're just zombies" distinction. Back in the Constantine cave, Zed, John and Gary see on the news that the authorities are treating the demon like a viral outbreak, quarantining the area. And the information broadcast is enough for John to understand they're dealing with a hunger demon, as he goes off to sort it out. Gary wants to go with him to help, but John flat out refuses to let him because he's a screw-up. Zed tries to reason with him, saying that people can change, to which John says,
"Bollocks. We are who we are. Eventually."
He does seem to be overly harsh on Gary, but again, I think that's John's projected aggression towards himself, because he's very much like Gary in many ways. They're both irrevocably damaged by Newcastle. After John leaves, Gary starts explaining Newcastle to Zed, but halfway through, pain hits Gary suddenly, causing her to grab his hand, which is when she experiences all of his drug binges in one go, giving her a huge contact high from him. What would happen if she just touched any drug user? Because let's be honest, Gary's addiction is no different to many other people's. But maybe because addiction is so intrinsic to Gary's personality is why she picked up on it. John has gotten into the supermarket thanks to the magic playing card he somehow managed to get back from the homeless guy who tried to kill him in the last episode, and he starts to talk to a mother and son who saw the whole thing go down. They're reluctant to talk to Constantine at first because they fear sounding insane, but John is quick to reassure them. They tell him about the swarm of bugs and how they flew into another person, a meat delivery guy, which is where John is off to next. The woman said she saw a swarm of bugs fly into another person's body. Now, regardless of how crazy that might seem, it's a little strange that she's now completely unaffected by it. She's just, that was odd. John is at the meat delivery place looking for the employee. He finds the fridge open and the dead employee, and it looks like the demon has left a trail of bodies in its wake. Well, that was considerate, even if it was slightly sarcastic. As John goes further into the fridge, he finds one person still alive, but very demonic, and he starts the incantation to trap it in the bottle. Hey, apparently even demons can be fans of The Exorcist, with their own impromptu spider-walk tributes. The spell starts drawing out the demon, and it seems to be working, but the demon's too strong for the bottle now, as it breaks. Constantine has to use a beef carcass as a shield, quickly running out of the fridge to trap the demon, albeit temporarily. Which is a vast underestimation of the demon on Constantine's part. But I think it's more of an underestimation of Gary. John was basically thinking, Gary trapped this demon, this one should be a doddle for me. Which brings it back to John thinking that Gary is useless and can't do anything right. And it's further emphasised when John returns to the mill and asks Gary how the hell did he manage to trap a thing like that. He tells them it's trapped for now, but they need to identify it by name to put it down for good. Zed gives John some drawings she's done of the person who originally had the demon inside him. Also, she tells him of her drug trip.
Now, earlier today, Gary and we touched and I experienced a psychic transference.
You, touched?
No, not like that. I mean, we only touched for like a second.
What was he implying there exactly? That they had sex? What a weird thing to leap to. But anyway, with Zed's pictures, John goes to speak to an old shaman friend and tells him about the hunger demon ravaging the populace. John mentions the demon originated in the Sudan, and after showing the pictures, the shaman tells John the demon is named Namath. This is another big change from the comic, because in the comic, John actually flew to Sudan and spoke to the shaman there. It gave the story a much more globe-trotting, adventurous vibe. But for the sake of a TV show, I can understand why they didn't do it. But there will be some travel here, as the shaman suggests taking a trip using a special drug that's so powerful its effects last forever. But the shaman reassures John as he has the antidote.
Oh, Bloody hell, that is heinous.
An acquired taste, certainly.
So, if we're tripping balls, how do we know to take the next bit?
Oh dear, that's never a good sign. The psychedelics begin as John sees amazing shapes and strange colours, and then something to creep out the squeamish in the audience, as the shaman takes out Constantine's eye and places it in his own socket, as he tells John what happened with Namath. We see a flashback in the Sudan of the people starving, but another shaman recognised it as the work of a hunger demon and decided to do something about it. Taking the boy Gary found as a sacrifice, the shaman removes the boy's tongue and carves sealing symbols on his body with a sacrificial knife. And the shaman left the boy to be consumed by Namath, but that's when Gary found him after he escaped. And then, fortunately for Constantine, the shaman wakes him up with the antidote. The thing with the eye is straight out of the comic, except there, it was clear that it actually happened. But here, it's just as possible that it's part of the acid trip, which I like. It brings a bit of ambiguity to all the mysticism going on. Back at the hideout, Gary feels like he can beat the demon again and is determined to try, but Zed won't let him go, which is when Gary grabs her, giving her her own acid trip, knocking her out, leaving her on the floor as he escapes. And back at the meat factory, the demon has managed to escape the fridge. The episode deals with guilt and responsibility a lot and how one deals with it. With the characters of John and Gary, you've got two diametrically opposed ideas. You've got John, who's all gung-ho ready to fight other people's demons, but has almost completely given up on himself, whereas Gary's willing to fight it all head-on, but couldn't handle it when things got tough. I think it shows John that, yeah, he's good in some areas, but he's still lacking in others. John gets back to find Zed practically comatose from her experience and is pretty pissed off at Gary when she tells John what happened. Zed says that Gary feels guilty and just wants to help, but Constantine knows him better than her and is sure he's gone to get another heroin fix. And sadly, we see John's proven right, as he finds Gary being beaten up by drug dealers. Which is genuinely disappointing to see, because throughout the episode, Gary's been wanting to make some kind of act of contrition to assuage his guilt. But when he actually tries, his addiction is what holds him back, which is Gary's own personal hunger demon in a way. But anyway, John quickly manages to get the drug dealers to go away by offering them the best high they'll ever have, giving them the root he ate earlier, so he's basically condemning them to a permanent psychedelic insanity. Hey, no one ever said Constantine was a hero. John takes Gary to a bar to recuperate. He asks why did John bother to rescue him, and John admits that although a massive pain in the arse, he's still a friend, allowing him to help with the demon, saying,
Everyone has the capacity to change.
Which mirrors what Zed told him earlier. However, John's saying it to use Gary for his own purposes. John has found where one of those ceremonial daggers is, conveniently in a local museum, as he plans to break in using Gary's lockpicking skills. John throws a bollard to smash the window, however, instead it stops in mid-air as Manny is back for more words of wisdom. Manny knows John's plan and wants to make sure he wants to go through with it, and after John says that he can do it, time starts again, leading to the smash. It's unclear what they were both referring to there. It seems like Constantine is planning to sacrifice himself to trap the demon, but one, I don't think Manny would go with that plan so lightly, and two, it's clear that Constantine was telling Manny and himself that he'll be able to live with what he's about to do. Gary quickly manages to pick open the Kusa knife case and gets back to John, who's distracted the security guard by making him think comically that he's a dancer, and will be in a trance until the alarm stops. It's now time to face the demon, who's in a theatre gorging on popcorn. And it's on the stage where John reveals all to Gary, telling him that he needs to sacrifice himself to trap the demon. You can tell John isn't comfortable at all with the situation, and Gary now sees that this was his plan all along. But he relents, saying that at last this finally makes his life mean something. John tells him it won't be quick, and it will be agony. Even though John tricked Gary, there's a sense of gung-ho, today is a good day to die kind of attitude from Gary. And John says,
I'm proud of you guys. Truly.
So there's no bad blood or reluctance from either of them, which makes the episode nowhere near as dark as the comic, where John tricked Gary to the very end, forcing him into being an unwilling sacrifice, making John much more of an arsehole than he is in the show. And the comic version, I think, is the way it should be, honestly. John performs the ritual drawing the demon out, with it flying around the room until entering Gary. John then carves the symbols into Gary's head, trapping the demon for good. He takes Gary back to the mill and Zed sees what John has done, yelling at him for how he betrayed Gary, which is when John tells Zed straight.
You think I wanted this? Any of it? I told you this would happen. People around me die. If you can't handle it, then go.
This would be the first time Zed has seen just how dangerous it is to be around Constantine. And the final scene of the episode is Gary writhing and screaming in agony as John sits by him waiting for him to die, as Manny appears to sit with him. Which is definitely a dark end to the episode, and overall, it was a great retelling of the first Hellblazer story. However, I do think they held back a bit by not making Gary more scummy than he already was, and by not making Constantine more of a manipulative bastard, which he should have been. So yeah, good episode, but could have been better if they made it a lot darker. Oh, and on the subject of whether Constantine got its second season, the answer is no. Well, actually, the status of the show is still in question, and it'll be repitched to NBC in May, so we'll know a lot more then. But hey, if NBC doesn't pick up the show, there's still hope that the Sci-Fi Channel will pick it up. I know. Let's just wait and see, shall we? I'll see you next time.